construction industry, which is responsible for one-third of the energy footprint, grapples to find more efficient, circular, and sustainable processes, and looks to timber with great hope. With the promise of circularity, carbon capture, and accessibility, timber is surely that talisman. Yet, why is the transition so difficult? In the study area in the Middle Himalayas, where the former regime of using local timber from the community forest is fast being replaced by energy intensive contemporary materials, we make a grassroots inquiry on what processes and social pathways bring about this change. The inquiry takes us to the Himalayan state of Himachal Pradesh in the upper Bias Valley along the Kullu Valley, to Shanag, which is one of the last settlements before the end of the tree line. The temperate conifer band extending from Afghanistan in the west to Sikkim in the east, given its historic inaccessibility and abundance of timber resources, is characterized by a specific style of timber architecture. Shanag has access to a community managed forest and a tradition of building with timber, and a clear preference for the material over concrete and other contemporary energy intensive materials. Yet, on reaching there, a simple question is asked: why aren't you building in timber anymore? The answer takes us to a whirlwind of several actors and networks. The discussion, which takes us to the houses of several of the interview respondents and day long walks with them, makes it clear that the answer is not a simple technical or economic one. The challenge, and hence the answer, to a material transition is rooted within the socio-spatial agency of the materials. Further, as timber from the so-called global north of Germany, Canada, New Zealand, along with the high risk of illegally logged timber from Russia, shows up for substantially lower cost locally, it affords two enquiries. Firstly, about the multi-scalar complications of our material engagements, and secondly, it dismantles the center-periphery, urban-rural, and global north and south narrative. The initially flat question of why don't we build with timber is replaced with what are the socio-spatial challenges of reviving timber architecture. Just as the title, the methods for this paper have been constructed based on the qualitative data analysis of the interviews. Initialized on Glasser and Strauss's grounded theory, it was taken forward on Corbin and Strauss's 6C model, of which the first 4 C's of context, causes, conditions, and consequences cannot be distinguished from one another. Yet, together, they form the complete actor network. The 5th C, covariances, which are groupings of interrelated codes, form the themes repeated through the paper, namely interspecies relations, commons governance, class, caste and gender, urbanization, and the last one, materiality. The 6th C, contingencies and strategies, are analyzed using the theoretical frameworks, namely the governance of commons and new materialism, which are integrated under the socio-spatial refiguration theory of sociality and materiality by Martina Liu. Let us take a brief look at the actors and networks that interact to produce the multi-spatial and multi-temporal nature of the query. The cows that dwelled in the ground floor of the houses and the bees that invariably inhabited the apiary boxes that were inbuilt in the walls created a networked connection with the forest and with the commons governance structures. Historically, when the nomadic lifestyle still existed, the women were the primary caretakers of the settlements and the forests while tending to the livestock left behind. As primary custodians of the forest, their dependence on the forest for livelihood and frequency of visit maps the forest as a gendered space for women. Apart from the knowledge regarding the forest trees, the women hold and transfer key information regarding overgrazing, illegal poachers, illegal loggers, flood control, and landslides. Although their decisions are mired in local politics, their knowledge is crucial for the forest and the safety of the settlement downhill. The interspecies relation with the land changes through climate change. Increased agriculture and apple plantations. The hill slopes are masked with apple plantations covered with bird nets. The role of the birds is replaced by insecticides which drive away even the pollinators, and cow manure is replaced by chemical fertilizers. The forests in the study area were first translocalized as part of the colonial endeavor to export grains from India to Britain. The local slow growing species of trees were replaced by fast growing varieties. The centralized forest management displaced the community management and changed the relationship between the forest and the settlements. The tragedy of the forest commons displays the inability of the central or the community model in successful management. The wood from the forest department, which is auctioned, and the timber, which is smuggled, both are taken to the plains and replaced by lower quality timber, which is imported. The ecological cost of such an exercise is enormous. Within the community forest are the protected forest areas under the Japanese International Cooperation Agency's Joint Forest Management Program. While increasing pressure on areas outside the protected area, the benefits of the program is also not distributed equitably. For an effective handshake between the centralized model and the community model, the passage of key information is necessary. In the hydropower project upstream, this information infrastructure was overlooked. The deforestation and the perceived increased flood risks due to the project diminished the commons governance infrastructure. On the other hand, the gods, or their embodiment as the gur, who through ritual possession represents revered figures like local heroes, forest spirits, sacred rocks, or trees, water bodies, sages, snakes, and ancestors, is able to invoke more than human agency to rally the community against the center when a common threat is perceived. The temples are still inevitably built from local timber, from the community forests. The unobstructed access to the forest resources displays their locally resolved or superior position in commons governance structure. The materiality of timber and its resonance with community structures is visible. Yet, the community is not a homogeneous unit. Spatially, the upper caste has secured access to the perennial spring, productive land, and forests. The disadvantaged caste must rely on the seasonal river and limited access to land resources. The DC's limited access to timber is seen materially in their built structures. As we move away from the center of the settlement, the disenfranchisement from community access is materially visible. Irrespective of the age of the building, the material transition from timber to concrete and steel is not only a time-based, but a spatial transition that is embedded in the sociality of the space. The material translocalization is not always a spatially widening phenomenon. As social practices diversify with in-migration, the landscape homogenizes with large-scale monocrops to align with trajectorial logistics of translocalization. The simultaneous opening and closing of space is evident. The access to forests was always socially stratified. Despite not having spatial access, through translocalization of their economic activity, the disadvantaged caste achieved economic emancipation. Through such economic empowerment, they made a claim to the forest access that was historically denied to them. On the other hand, the women have been impaired in the translocal transition. With limited access to higher education within the settlement, the men go to urban centers and are equipped with tools to negotiate the translocal infrastructures. The women who stay behind are handicapped by the lack of such a toolkit. The former, larger agency of the women's groups, that is the Mahila Mandals, in the forest management, is sidelined in the Japanese International Cooperation Agency's Joint Forest Management Program meetings, which are now coming to be controlled by men. As space is opening for the disadvantaged caste, it seems to be closing for women. The forest management, timber access, and transitioning building technology accumulates to a heat sink in the valley, impacting the already receding glacier. The receding glacier means the apple plantations do not receive the chilling units required for production. The lower output from apples is further driving the land use to tourism and increased building activity, cyclically driving the change. As we zoom out, the ecological drivers of climate change and effects converge here. As the glacier recedes, It is further pushed by two global changes. The western disturbances that rise in the Mediterranean Sea travel eastwards till they encounter the high altitude of the Himalayas, bringing winter precipitation to the western Himalayas. The climate change induced weakening of the western disturbances has reduced snowfall. On the other hand, the summer monsoons in the subcontinent are related to the Eurasian glaciation. The increased summer monsoon increases the rain on snow events, increasing the peak flow during monsoons, driving increased flood events and reduced water security. The causes and consequences are no longer distinguishable. Thank you. I'm looking forward to presenting the entire paper on 30th of July 2025. See you then.